In the fog-choked canals of Venice, 25, where the Adriatic wind carried the rot of drowned dreams and plague-riddled corpses bobbed. Beneath bridges, Marco Venier knelt beside his mother's cot in a crumbling palazzo once owned by his merchant. Father now a tomb of debts and despair. The floods of the previous winter had turned the streets into black mirrors of death. His mother, once a singer whose voice could hush the Piazza San Marco, now coughed blood into rags, her lungs drowning from the inside. Marco, 24, broad-shouldered but hollow-eyed, had not drawn a single map in 14 months. The ink on his fingers had dried to cracks. The parchment he once sold for gold now fed the fire to keep his mother warm. Creditors hammered at the door daily. The city had forgotten him. He had forgotten himself. Then came the Mongols. They arrived at dusk. 3 riders on shaggy steppe ponies, cloaks crusted with mountain frost. The leader dismounted with a thud that shook the alley stones, a giant of a man. Skin like cured leather, left eye sewn shut with thick black cord that pulled the lid into a permanent grimace. A scar ran from his hairline to jaw, pale against bronze. His voice was gravel dragged over iron. The Great Khan requires a caretaker for a possession in the Forbidden Mountains. 5 taels of silver each moon. First tael now, he dropped a pouch. It hit the floor with the weight of destiny. 5 silver discs, each stamped with Kublai's wolf head seal, rolled out like predator eyes. Marco's mother gasped from her bed. A sound like tearing silk. Prepaid silver is blood money. Marco, they pay graves, not men. But Marco saw the apothecary's bill, the physician's shrug, the empty larder. He saw his mother's ribs counting down to 0. I'll take it. The Mongol's good eye narrowed respect, or recognition of desperation. He handed over a second pouch of copper for travel, and a parchment scroll sealed in crimson wax. Blackstone Outpost. 5 days. Miss it. And your mother hangs with every soul you ever loved. That night, his mother dreamed of ravens. Hundreds. They perched on the windowsill, beaks dripping red, wings blotting the moon. She woke screaming, clawing at Marco's sleeve. It's the law of cursed jobs. They pay up front because the mountain keeps the change. Marco kissed her fevered brow. I'll bring you back a miracle. Mama Dawn broke gray and merciless. He boarded a rattling cart north. The driver a mute with a hair lip who smelled of onions and fear. 2 days through the Veneto plains, fields of withered wheat. Villages abandoned to famine, children with bellies swollen like drums. The air grew colder with every mile. Breath froze on beards. On the 3rd day, the cart stopped at the Po River. Now a sluggish serpent of meltwater and ice. A flatboat waited, manned by a ferryman whose face was half-eaten by frostbite. He took Marco's copper without a word, poling through chunks of ice that clinked like funeral bells. Night 3, Marco slept in a riverside barn, rats gnawing his boots. He dreamed of his mother's ravens, only now their eyes were green, glowing, watching from the rafters. Day 4, the Alps rose like the spine of a sleeping dragon. Vegetation vanished, only gray stone and snow-capped fangs. The cart could go no further. Marco walked the final league to Blackstone Outpost, a fortress of black basalt wedged into the mountainside like a splinter in flesh. Arrow-slit windows wept icicles. Mongol guards in lamellar armor eyed him with the boredom of men who had seen too many. Replacements. Fresh meat. One grunted, spitting into the snow. Last caretaker ran barefoot into the night. Found him 2 days later, frozen solid. Mouth open like he was still screaming at the moon. Eyes pecked out by crows. Marco's stomach lurched, but he clutched the parchment like a talisman. The path to the prison was no path. It was a wound carved into the cliff, a ledge barely wider than a man's shoulders. One side sheer rock, the other a drop into oblivion. Fog swallowed sound. Every footfall echoed like a heartbeat. Halfway up, a rope bridge swayed over a chasm. Planks rotten, Ropes frayed, wind screamed through the gaps. Marco crawled on hands and knees, splinters biting his palms, the abyss whispering his name. 3 hours later, lungs burning, he reached the camp, a stone hut, a fire pit, and an iron-barred cell sunk into the mountainside like a grave. The old caretaker sat hunched over dying embers, beard to his waist, eyes milky with terror, clothes more whole than cloth. 6 months, he rasped. 6 months of hell. Sit, boy, before your legs give out. Marco collapsed. The old man shoved a crust of moldy bread into his hands. Rules: memorize or die. Rule 1, dawn feeding, 1 dried fish. Place it 3 paces from the bars, never closer. Rule 2, never look into its eyes. Rule 3, keep the fire alive. Wolves come every night. If the flames die, they'll eat you before it does. The old man rolled up his sleeve. 4 gashes ran from shoulder to wrist deep, parallel. The flesh curled back like petals. I looked once. It's beautiful, hypnotic, like staring into paradise and knowing you'll never leave. Marco's voice cracked. What is it? The old man laughed. A sound like breaking glass. A princess. A demon. A lover. Doesn't matter. Just don't look. Night fell like a guillotine. Marco fed the hut's single room with splintered pine. The cell was 20 paces away. A black maw in the rock. Chains clanked inside, heavy, deliberate. A deep inhale, like a beast scenting prey, then scratching slow, rhythmic, like claws composing music on stone. Marco lay on the dirt floor, sword across his chest. Sleep came in fits. At midnight, he woke to silence. The fire had sunk to coals. 2 emerald lights glowed in the cell's darkness, unblinking. Dawn was a bruise on the horizon. Marco stumbled to the cell with the dried fish, placed it, turned away. A blur of motion snatch. Crunch. Gone. Then the scratching resumed. Softer, almost playful. Days bled into routine. Hunt, feed, stoke fire, avoid the eyes. But the eyes found him anyway, every night. Those twin emeralds tracked his every move, patient as a cat with a mouse. On day 7, Marco trapped a mountain hare. He roasted it over flames. Fat dripping, scent thick enough to wake the dead. He approached the bars. Fish must be boring. Silence. Then a hand emerged. Not human. Padded palm, sleek black fur like liquid midnight. Fingers long and elegant, claws curved but sheathed. It took the meat gently. Their fingers brushed, warm, alive. Marco's heart stuttered. He didn't pull away. That night, the fire died. Wolves came, 15 shadows with eyes like molten gold. They circled the hut, snarling, testing. Marco bolted outside with a burning brand, swinging wildly. One lunged, teeth snapped inches from his throat. He stumbled back, tripped, and the pack closed in. Panic. He sprinted to the cell, fumbled the iron key, slammed inside, locked the door from within. Darkness swallowed him. Chains rattled, deep breathing. A silhouette sat in the corner, humanoid. Curvaceous hips, waist-length hair catching stray firelight from the hut outside. Gold glinted at throat, wrists, ankles. She didn't move. Wolves battered the bars. Marco pressed against the door, sword forgotten. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. A warm hand touched his shoulder, pulled him down. He sat beside her. Her body heat enveloped him like a blanket. Fur brushed his arms soft, plush, luxurious. She smelled of pine and wildflowers. Marco slept, dreamless. Morning, he woke alone. The hair was gone. On the stone floor, a single claw had etched a perfect heart. Weeks passed. Routine evolved into ritual. Marco hunted daily hare, marmot, once a young ibex. He cooked with herbs, scavenged from crevices, passed plates through the bars. Their hands lingered. He began to see her. The fur was thick, mottled, black with subtle silver streaks like starlight on water. Her body was athletic, yet feminine, strong shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, hips flaring with primal grace. Gold jewelry torque, bangles, anklets gleamed against the plush. Her hands were paw-like but delicate, fingers dexterous enough to braid her own hair. She was beautiful, not human beautiful, something wilder. One night, fire crackling, he whispered. "What's your name?" Long silence, then a voice deep, melodic, human yet resonant like a cello liana. Marco dropped his knife. "You speak only to those who listen." She told him of her people, the Luperi, beast folk of the high steppes beyond the Khan's reach, furred, clawed, but with souls that sang. She had been a princess, promised to a warlord, refused the Khan's bed, was chained as punishment. The enchantment on the iron required royal blood to break. Marco gripped the bars. "I'll free you." Liana's laugh was bittersweet. Many have tried, all failed. But Marco was no longer the broken mapmaker. The mountain had forged him. He learned her rhythms when she paced, when she sang wordlessly under her breath. When the chains chafed her ankles raw, he left salves made from pine resin. She left him gifts, a carved bone comb, a lock of her fur tied with gold thread. One storm night, lightning illuminating the cell, he asked, "Are you a monster?" Liana stepped into the light. Rain hissed on the hut's roof. "What is a monster?" "Marco the Khan who cages me, or the girl who dreams of running." He reached through the bars, cupped her furred cheek. "You're the most human thing I've ever touched." Their lips met hers, soft, warm, careful of fangs. The kiss tasted of snow and freedom. 3 moons later, the envoys returned. 3 riders, drunk on fermented mare's milk, dragging sacks of rice and silver. The one-eyed giant led them, his scar livid in the torchlight. They dumped supplies, then turned to the cell. "Look, the beast still lives," one jeered, hurling a wineskin. "Bet she's tighter than a virgin goat." Liana growled low, chains rattling. The one-eyed grabbed Marco by the throat, slammed him against the bars. "You feed it good, boy. Maybe it'll suck you off for extra meat." Marco choked. Vision tunneling, then movement. A furred arm, striped with muscle, shot between the bars. Claws like obsidian daggers raked across the soldier's neck. Blood arced, hot and metallic. The man gurgled, collapsed. The second envoy charged. Marco, fueled by rage, tackled him. They grappled on the ledge, fists, elbows, desperation. Marco shoved. The man teetered, screamed, plummeted into the abyss. The one-eyed drew steel. Liana roared a sound that cracked stone. Marco snatched the dead soldier's sword, rushed the cell door. The key turned. He swung at the chains. Sparks. Metal screamed. 1 link, 2. The enchantment shattered with a sound like breaking glass. Liana surged free tall, majestic, fur rippling like a banner. The one-eyed turned to flee. She pounced, 4-legged, faster than wind. Her jaws closed on his spine, a wet crunch. Silence. She returned, muzzle bloodied, eyes blazing. "We go. Now." Marco draped the largest cloak over her, a bare fur mantle with a deep hood, from a distance. She looked like a tall woman in mourning. Up close, a goddess of fang and fury. They descended the scar path at dawn, hand in paw. The bridge swayed, but Liana leapt across gaps Marco could barely crawl. Wolves shadowed them, her kin, not enemies. They escorted the pair like an honor guard, Days blurred into weeks. Through pine forests, silver with frost. Across frozen rivers where salmon leapt like silver arrows. Into lands untouched by the Khan's banners. They slept in caves, bodies entwined. Liana taught Marco her language growls that meant love, purrs that meant home. He taught her Venetian lullabies. One night, beneath a sky bruised with auroras, she asked, "Will you stay with me among my people?" Marco traced the gold torque at her throat. "I was lost the day I took the Khan's silver. You found me." Her tribe's valley was paradise, hidden emerald meadows ringed by waterfalls, tree houses woven from living oaks, lupaeri of every hue, snow leopards, red pandas, silver foxes. They welcomed Liana as lost royalty, Marco as the human who broke the curse. His mother arrived months later, carried in a litter by merchants paid in gold. She wept to see her son alive, wept harder to hold her granddaughter, a cub with Marco's eyes and Liana's midnight fur. Marco drew new maps, charts of rivers that sang, mountains that breathed. At night, he lay beneath firs, Liana's tail curled around his waist, her breath warm on his neck. The emerald eyes no longer hypnotized. They simply loved. And in the distance, the forbidden mountains stood silent, empty chains swaying in the wind. A monument to the day a desperate mapmaker paid in silver and was repaid in freedom.